Okay, Boker Tov and Shavua Tov. You know that sometimes when we say Boker Tov or Shavua Tov, we say it as a description. And sometimes we say it as a prayer. And this morning, it's more of a prayer than a description. As we know, 4 soldiers were killed during the Shabbat. 2 of them, one is from Telmond, one is from Azriel. So 2 Levayot would be here in our cemetery in Telmond today. I understand one of them is at 3, begins at 3. So of course, people that are able to come and show last respect to a soldier that fell in defending our country and our nation. Obviously, that's a great mitzvah. But we are here, and we are here to learn and to draw strength from and faith from the words and the Torah of our greatest rabbis, as the name of the series is. And I hope that we'll be able to gather some of the strength and faith from what we would learn today. The shiur, as the rest of the series, is dedicated Leilui Nishmat Rafael Moshe ben Eliyahu. And today we are going to learn about Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grodzinski, also known as the Achi'azar. And Rabbi Chaim Ozer, a part of being a very important halachic decisor upon some of his decisions who rely to this day. A part of that, he was also one of the most important political leaders of what can already be called at that stage the Haredi world before the Holocaust, up leading to and during the beginning, the first half of the Holocaust of the Second World War. He was born in 1863 and he died in Vilna in 1940, a short time after the Soviets reconquered Lithuania. I hope that we would speak at least a few less sentences about the historical situation as it unfolded. And obviously in the coming, we are just before Pesach break, but after Pesach, we would have a shiur next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, and then we'll go to a Pesach break. And after Pesach, we would learn about this period of the pre-Holocaust, just before the Holocaust and during the Holocaust, and also a little about the history of the Jewish people that was intertwined with European history at the time. So, but back to Reb Chaim Ozer Grodzinski. So he was born, as I said, in 1863 in Ivya. That's a city in Lithuania. Back then it was Lithuania. Nowadays it's part of Belarus. And both his father and his grandfather served as the rabbis of this small city, small Jewish community, small shtetl. And he was, as his grandfather was the rabbi, and his father was the rabbi, and he was a very gifted and skilled young man. Everyone expected him to become the next rabbi. He has in his sefer, in the responsa, we speak about the nature of this work, I hope Be'ezrat Hashem during the shiur, but in it, he has an answer, the responsa, so a few letters that he wrote at the age of 14. And what he wrote in the age of 14, I was wondering to bring it just to give us a taste, but I decided that trying to understand what he wrote in the age of 14 would just take us too long. So that is just to understand the type of genius that we are here speaking about. So most of his Torah he learned from his father and his grandfather in, we may say, the old school Shita of Lithuania of Torah learning that is very direct, very clear, trying to steer off from what was called in a negative way pilpul. So what seems to be maybe a distance questions and answers and bringing proofs from unrelated areas. So they tried to veer off from this type of discussions, of halachic Talmudic discussions, and tried to remain as faithful as they could to the pshat, the plain meaning of the halacha. Obviously, I'm doing a disservice here as I represent Shita in such a superficial way, but that is the basic tenets, I believe. and also with great tendency towards halacha lemaaseh. We can understand that his father was the rabbi, his grandfather was the rabbi of a city. So he was very much inclined in young age towards halachic practical discussions. However, as he was growing and became a teenager, he was sent to Volozhin, a yeshiva, very important and famous yeshiva in Europe. We spoke about it already a few times. And back at the time that he was a teenager, the rabbi, one of the important rabbis in Volozhin was Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, Rabbi Chaim of Brisk, about whom we had a whole session. And he comes there and he learns for 2 years under Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, who he considered later as his rabbi outside of his own father, which taught him most of what he knew. But he acquired many of the techniques, we may say, that Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik was famous for, the Brisker method, the conceptual analytical way of learning the Gemara. And he was able to use, and that's very interesting, he was able to use both methods. So I was this Shabbat, I was not here in Talmud, I was in my yeshiva in Alon Shvut, in Har Etzion. And I spoke with Rav Moshe Lichtenstein. And I spoke with him, I told him I'm going to speak about Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grodzinski in Vilna. And I asked him what can he tell me about Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grodzinski. So I heard a little both about the way that he sees his sponsor, his Achi'ezer, and also a few more personal stories that are going in the family, Soloveitchik family, in which they encountered Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grodzinski a few times. I will share with you some of these stories. So, be it as it may, it's very interesting that when I asked Rav Moshe Lichtenstein about the method, the learning method that is represented in the Achi'ezer by Rabbi Chaim Ozer, he told me, yes, he's half the way towards Brisk. So he made half the way. But when you read from the biographers of the Achi'ezer himself, they obviously do not present him as going half the way. They said, no, he was able to combine the best of the two worlds. So that's so interesting to see how everything depends on your point of view. But that's, they both described exactly the same phenomena. The only question is, where do you come from? So and again, is slightly technical in his approach, which makes quoting response from a little difficult in our in the way that we teach the shiurim here. So I would mostly focus on letters that he wrote and less on responses, although I do hope to be able to learn a few short responses. But just again, trying to describe his way. So he is very direct to the point. Sometimes you read the responsa and you know where you begin and you have no idea where the road is going to take you. So when you open another BU, the answer, for example, so that's 200 years before the Achi'ezer, but just to give us a taste. So you can begin with a question about Sfirat HaOmer, go through a sugya in Kodshim, then give an answer from sugya in Baba Kama, and then back to Sfirat HaOmer, and all of that in just one page, and it's amazing. It's amazing. It's a tour de force. But sometimes some of the equations, you may say, can be discussed, can be debated. With the Achi'ezer, it almost never happens. It can be long answers, but you know where you begin, you know where you end, and most of the sources are going to be the classical sources that discuss the question that is at hand, and he is analyzing them and trying to both give you the foundations, the concepts, as he learned from Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, but also, again, combining the old methods, just trying to understand the plain meaning of the sugya and what should be the halachic outcome. So again, it's a very interesting combination of these words. Be it as it may, he's in Volozhin, as I said, only for 2 years, and in 1883, he is back to his homeland in Lithuania, but it's already clear that he's not going back to Ivia to take the place of his father as the rabbi of the city because he is meant to much more than the small shtetl of Evia. So instead, he is getting married with a girl named Alte, which is the daughter of one of the Rabbanim of Vilna. Now here, there is an important fact, which is that Vilna back then, for already 150 years, didn't have a formal rabbi. There was no chief rabbi of Vilna. And that was because of an historical incident 150 years before, in which there was a great debate. In the time of the Gaon of Vilna, there was a great debate regarding who should become the rabbi of Vilna. And the debate went to a very personal note, and it didn't end up well. It ended up with the Goyim interfering, and there was a great Chilul Hashem. So the result was that the people of Vilna, the Jews of Vilna, had resulted that they would never take a chief rabbi, a Rav Rashi again. So if you don't have a Rav Rashi, you cannot argue who would be the Rav Rashi. So that's one way to solve the problem. Instead, there was a Vad HaRabbanim, there was a rabbinical committee that was gathered from the important rabbi of Vilna. Now, Vilna was a very important Jewish city, and there were always big and important rabbis in Vilna. So there was no shortage in Rabbanim, but there was no central figure. That is what is important to understand. And that is as they say, that is a gun I am now hanging on the wall, and it's going to fire during this shiur. So we are, but that's the story. So he's now getting married with with the daughter of one of these rabbis of Vilna, and shortly after, 2 years after his marriage, his father-in-law passes away, is niftar, and he is taking his place at the age of 22, a very young age. He is becoming one of the important rabbis of Vilna, again, an important city. And you can see again the way they treated him already at the age of 22 as a great Torah scholar, as a Talmid Chacham, who is deserved to lead a great city such as Vilna. Now, what is interesting about there are many interesting things about Rabbi Chaim Ozer, but one of them is that he was very much involved not only in Torah learning, but also in the political movements, you may say, and not only he was involved in them, he was involved in founding the political movements of, again, what is now can be recognized as the Haredi world. So he is, for example, one of the leading forces behind the foundation of Agudat Israel, a very important political organization known, obviously, to this day as representing the Haredi society. And so he's one of the rabbis that were very key, had very key involvement in organizing Agudat Israel, and later he was the energy behind speaking with all of the different rabbis and making sure they all remain, because as you know, it is very complicated to keep all of the rabbis in one committee, and you had Hasidim, and you had Mitnagdim, and the Litvaks. As you may know, the Mizrahi were not part, most of the time, of the Agudat Israel, but still they were trying, at least for the time being, to keep good relations with the Mizrahi. So he was the one that was trying to keep everyone on board. Everyone should remain on the train. And that, of course, it just took him a lot of energy and a lot of time. And he himself says that he had to make a decision that he would write less Torah than what he wanted and intended, and maybe would have been better for him. But because this is the importance of leading these political organizations, then it is better, it is more, that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls him to do. So in the introduction, that is half of the responsa he put out. he put it out in 3 volumes. There is a 4th volume that is much more sleek, and that is 2 of them. So when he printed them as 4 books, and each one came in a different date. Later, it was all reprinted. There are also prints in which all was printed in 1 volume, a thick volume, not extremely thick. This is a volume which is a half of the Sefer. So that is Gimel and Dalet together, just to give you. So that's not so much of a production for someone of his scale. And there is a reason to that. The reason to that is that he was so involved in the Jewish life. So this is a book of letters that he wrote. That is 1 volume. There are 2 more. So there are more, I think, I'm sure, there are more letters than responsa that we have from him, which in a sense is unbalanced because he was a great Torah scholar. He was not a political leader in the sense that we are not now know political leaders. He was a rabbi, a great one. However, he saw it as a work of God, a work of heaven, to make sure that the Jews in this particular difficult time were led by someone that understood the responsibility. And he saw that no one, in the place where no one else stood up, he was the one that did it. So if you look at the first source in the pages, so that's from his introduction to the 1st volume of his response of the Achi'ezer, and that is from the year 1922. 1922, so he's already 60 when he writes that. And he says, אמנם עד עתה נמנעתי מלהוציא לאור חידושי תורה והשו אשר איתי בכתובים. He says, up to now, I avoided printing the חידושים of Torah and the responsa that I have, מפני all ההוראה, because I'm so busy with instructing, ועבודת הציבור, and the political work, אשר הוטל עליי בעודני צעיר לימים. He says, already from a very young age, I was involved in this עבודת הציבור, in the political work, ותמיד נתתי משפט הקדימה להענינים הציבוריים והכלליים על ענייני הפרטיים. He says, I always had to give precedence, priority first to the things, to the matters of the public over my own private considerations. Now, what does it mean by my own private considerations? We do not speak here about buying a house in the Caribbean, right? When you speak about private considerations, you speak about printing out Chidushei Torah for the sake of the people, for the sake of Torah learners. But he says that when you compare it to his work for all of European Jewry, then yes, the public matters are the political matters, and that's what had to take priority. And so I didn't have the time to print out everything that I had, and they skip a little. He says, in Ben Ko Karvu Yemei HaZikna, he says 40 years passed, and I didn't print anything at the age of 60. ואמרתי, עת לעשות לביתי, time came to do something for myself. So what is doing something to myself? Printing this 1st volume of the אחיעזר. כי אי אפשר לדחות עוד לימים יבואו. כי מי יודע מה יולד יום. He says, I cannot postpone it anymore because who knows what would happen. And in the year 1922, between world wars, especially in Eastern Europe, things do not look great. That's something that is very important to understand, that the situation of the Jews did not just begin to deteriorate at the beginning of World War II. Much, much, much earlier, things were going very sore. Things were very, very bad. We are already after the communist revolution at 1922, and there is an Iron Curtain. The situation is very grim, especially in Russia, but also in Lithuania, which is now an independent country. But the Lithuanians are not necessarily great Jewish lovers, and the situation economically and otherwise is not good. And he continues, he says, I do not know what would happen in the future. In the end, everything would be for vain, or everything that they wrote. והכתבים יאכלם ash. In the end, it would all be eaten by ash, by moss. And he says that is what happened to the חיבורים המסודרים אשר השאיר אחריו אבי זקני הגדול. He says, my father, the Av Beidin of Evia, had left works, and I didn't have the time to print them, because he was working in the matters of the public, נשרפו בשרפה הגדולה שהייתה שם בשנת תרנ"א. So everything my father wrote, all the manuscripts were burned down. As you know, in Europe, the buildings were built out of wood, and every few decades, that was what happening every few decades for hundreds of years, the city would burn down. And that's the sad reality. The buildings were very close to each other, and not always they were very safe, and the means of putting down fires obviously were not modernized. And so when fire came, it was extremely difficult to take control, to get control over it, and many times half of the city was burned down. We all know some famous cases, such as in London. But London is only famous because many people live there, and so there were many casualties. But all over Europe, it happens many times, and so happened in Evia. And as he says, the manuscripts of my father were burned down, and that also gave him a motivation to finally print his own works, which obviously we are blessed with. Now, when we speak about his political involvement, then Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grodzinski is being seen as one of the leaders of what is called the doctrine of Dat Torah. Dat Torah doctrine. What does it mean, the doctrine of Dat Torah? That is the idea that if someone is a great rabbi and is knowledgeable in all areas of Torah, then he's also knowledgeable in the political life, and he should be at least consulted and maybe followed completely in his instructions about how Jews not only should live their halachic life, but also everything, all of their political public life. So if opening something, closing something, organizations, everything should be done according to the instructions of the great rabbis. That is again, in very superficial way, the doctrine of that Torah. It was written extensively by a certain professor called Binyamin Brown from Hebrew University. He is a Yerei Shamayim. He's a very nice man, and I had the merit of meeting him a few times. And I think that at least some of his work was also translated to English. Be'ezrat Hashem, maybe I will be able to share with you some of it. And he is a very interesting, he analyzes the type of leadership that was demonstrated by Rabbi Chaim Ozer, and he shows that Rabbi Chaim Ozer, while he obviously upheld this idea of that Torah, and as I said, he was involved in all areas of Jewish political lives, he had a very specific, you may say, strain or color of this idea of that Torah. And that was that some of the rabbis that were, as I said, upholding the Dat Torah doctrine, they believed that the way the Dat Torah should be understood is that you should go to the Torah, you should go to Halach, you should go to the statements of Chazal, and from there you learn them very well, and just as you can have an answer to the question of a milchik spoon falling into a fleishik pot, so you can have an answer regarding the question of how you should lead the Jewish people when the communists take over, or in a democratic country, etc., etc., etc. So coming from the Sfarim, from the books, to reality. Reb Chaim Ozer had a different view. He believed that the great rabbis, by learning so much Torah and understanding the will, you may say, the will of Hashem, the Ratzon of Hashem, as it's not only written, but as it represented by the Torah, and then they come to reality, they can try to understand. Obviously, no one is immune, right, for mistakes. That is something that I think that almost no Jew ever argued that the rabbis cannot be mistaken. That is from a different religion. However, they did believe that the best answer that human can give can be given by these great rabbis. They may be mistaken, but they are your best chance, your best shot. And the way that Rabbi Chaim Ozer saw it is, if you learn enough Torah, as I said, then your mind is now shaped by the will of Hashem. And now when you look into reality, you can maybe intuit, you can try to figure out what is the will of Hashem in current situation. Now, you would not be able to explain how you came from the Sfarim to your conclusion, right? Because in the end, it's intuition. It's by learning so much Torah and by shaping your mind in this understanding of Dvar Hashem, of the words of God, that you are now able to give, or to you are able to give your best educated guess, maybe, to what is the will of God to the current situation. How can you apply the will of Hashem to what we are living nowadays? That is the basic idea. Now, that gave a much more pragmatic stance than the people that only came from the books. Because when you see a statement in the Gemara and you say, now you must uphold this statement to the reality, regardless of what the reality is, then obviously you are coming from a much more nukshe. How would you say nukshe? Rigid, with a much more rigid point of view. You won't be able to customize yourself to the changing situations and conditions. But if you come and you say, I would look into the reality and I would try to understand how is the word of God coming from this reality, then you would be much more open to different situations and conditions that creating different responses and needs. And now, very interestingly, the Rav, the man that was the leader of the opposing, we may say, side of that Torah, was Rav Elchanan Wasserman, about whom we would have to have a different shiur, but they were brothers-in-law. So they were both brothers-in-law. Rav Elchanan Wasserman was very extreme in his positions. If he understood that, for example, a very famous debate between them was the relation to the Tzionim, or to non-religious Jews in general, how, to what extent are you allowed to cooperate with them? Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman held that if someone is a Rasha, in the halachic definition, you are not allowed to make any partnership with, and that would mean that if, for example, people came to Eretz Israel back then, we are already speaking about the British era, so they are coming here, they would not be allowed to join the Histadrut. The meaning of not being able to join the Histadrut is that you would not be allowed almost to get a work. It would be extremely difficult for you to live in the new Yishuv, in Yerushalayim, in the old settlement, and making your living from tzedakah, that you can do without joining the Histadrut. But if you want to live in one of the new kibbutzim, and some of them were religious, or one of the new settlements, and some of them were now established by Agudat Israel itself, such as Chafetz Chaim. If you would go according to Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman, you would not be allowed even to hire or to work with the Chilonim, with the Tzionim. Now that would almost create a situation in which you won't be able to live here in Eretz Israel. So Rabbi Elchanan Wasserman wrote an open letter to the people of Agudat Israel in Eretz Israel, in which he declared that they are not allowed to join the Histadrut HaTzionit. They didn't necessarily ask him, but it was very important for him to send them a letter and to say, and he says in his letter, I'm not saying you my own opinion. If it was my opinion, you should not follow it. I am giving you the opinion of Torah, that Torah. And they sent a letter to Rabbi Chaim Ozer, and they asked him, what should we do? Rabbi Chaim Wasserman is basically decreeing upon us that we should leave Eretz Israel because we won't be able to remain here if we will not cooperate at least at some level with the Histadrut HaTzionit. And Rabbi Chaim Ozer sent them back a letter. You can see it source bet. The letter is addressed to Rav Reuven Katz, was the Av Beidin of Petach Tikva. We have to remember that Petach Tikva is from the Aliyah Rishona. It was established as almost all of the settlements of the Aliyah Rishona by religious people. Nowadays, it's very easy to forget that many of the first Olim were religious, and many of the new settlements were established by people that left Yerushalayim from the old Yishuv. They were religious. Rishon LeZion and Petach Tikva and Rehovot, all of these were established by religious people. And Petach Tikva, of course. And so Rav Reuven Katz wrote a letter to Rabbi Chaim Ozer. And he said, Rabbi Chaim Wasserman sent a letter. Not only if you sent the letter privately, then we could have somehow discussed it and maybe just disregard it. However, he sent it as an open letter. And it was, Rabbi Chaim Wasserman made sure that it would be posted over all of the shuls and in Pashkevilim. So he put us in a very awkward situation. What should we do? That's the letter that he sent to Rabbi Chaim Ozer. Now let's see how Rabbi Chaim Ozer answered. על דבר המכתב גלוי, about the open letter של הגאון, הרב הגאון, מורנו ורבנו, רבי חנן וסרמן נרו יאיר, תשובה לפועלי אגודת ישראל, שנתפס בעיתונים. So, רבי חנן וסרמן sent it to the newspapers, וגם בגיליונות מיוחדים והדביקו בבתי כנסיות, and also on special פשקבילים. They put on the בתי כנסת, אשר התאונן מעלת כבוד תורתו בצדק הזה. So, רב ראובן כץ said, he said, I don't know what to do. I am the Av Beitin, I am the Rav here, and he is sending a letter from Europe with instructions to my people. What should they do? Just think about the situation. Think that someone would come now with a letter from Nebrak, let's say, and post it here on the door of the shul. In what situation does it put me as the Rav of the shul? That's a very complicated situation, and it doesn't help that Rav Chanan Wasserman was seen by many as a leading authority of the generation, and Rav Reuven Katz, which was a very important figure, and in no way I am trying to weigh the importance of these two figures. But obviously, in their public stance, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman is a name that's known to this day. Rav Reuven Katz, I don't know how many people here, if I would have asked, would have known who he was. So Rabbi Chanan Wasserman was more known. That is a fact. So that put Rav Reuven Katz in a very complicated situation. Says Rabbi Chaim Ozer, אתפלא גם אני, מה ראה על ככה לפרסם גילוי דעתו הפרטי, בלי התיישבות? Says, I also do not understand. Why did he put his own opinion, meaning Rav Wasserman, without התיישבות, without first speaking with me, without speaking with others? Now, I know what the answer of Rav Wasserman would be. He would say, I didn't put my own private opinion. I published Torah's opinion. And I do not want others to try and put me down and you know, dismiss me before I write the letter. So that's why I didn't want to consult anyone. גם הפריז על המידה, ואין ענייני היישוב בארץ הקודש דומים לעניינים פרטיים בגולה מכמה טעמים ונימוקים, ובכלל בעניין גדול ונכבד כזה, אי אפשר להורות מרחוק בלי דעת הפרטים. He says, A, ארץ ישראל and חוץ לארץ are not the same. So it is not the same rule. The Shulchan Aruch is the same Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, but in public matters, you cannot go only by the Shulchan Aruch. You need a more holistic view. And in order to have this holistic view, he says, בכלל בעניין גדול ונכבד כזה, אי אפשר להורות מרחוק בלי דעת הפרטים. You must be close so you can see the details. If you are from far away, then you cannot, it would be unthinkable. For example, nothing in this world is unthinkable anymore. But just imagine that the question, without right now even saying yes or no, but the whole question of the recruiting of the Bnei Yeshivot to Tzar, which is a major question. Just imagine that a certain rabbi from the United States, being as important as he is, he would be the one that would give the answer. Now, we all understand that it's impossible. You may like or dislike the answer being given by the Rabbanim in Eretz Israel, but at least they know the material. They are here. They see the situation. But giving an answer from far away, is it? Now, Rabbi Chaim Ozer would say, why not? I am sitting with all of the Sfarim, and I'm analyzing all of the sources, and he was a great genius, and I come to the conclusion. That is an halachic question, a Torah question with a Torah answer. Says Rabbi Chaim Ozer, that is wrong. That is not the way to pasken questions in public policy. You must be there and hear the people and see the details of the situation. רק בית דין חשוב במקומם, אשר לא אלמן ישראל בארץ הקודש, מגדולי תורה ויראה. He says there are great geniuses in Torah scholars in Eretz Israel. They are the ones that should lead. His representative, we may say, in Eretz Israel was the Chazon Ish, Rabbi Avraham Yeshayahu Karelitz, but he, I think, would have to wait to the summertime before we'd be able to speak about him, because he belongs, we may say, to the leadership of after the Holocaust. So that would be in a very different session. זה יודעים על אתר, כל הפרטים מכל הצדדים, ועליהם להגיד דעתם דעת תורה, את הדין ילכו בה ואת המעשה אשר יעשון. So you can see from here that he does speak about דעתם דעת תורה. He does speak about the importance that Rabbi would lead the way, and obviously he himself was a great, not only a Torah scholar, but also a political leader. However, he says you cannot just pasken from the Sfarim, you must be there and sense and feel, touch the reality on the ground. Okay. So that's the description that Professor Brown gives to his style, we may say, of Torah leadership. Again, I think that it's extremely interesting. He got many offerings to get important rabbinic positions. I would mention here two of them, which were extremely important. One, he was asked to go to Petersburg, which was the Russian capital at the time. And many hoped that if he would go to there, he would be able even to better organize Russian Jews. And after a lot of deliberations, he declined the offer because he felt that Vilna needs him. As a sign of respect for declining this offer, the Vilna leadership asked him if he wants to get to be the chief rabbi of Vilna. As I said, that was a position that was abolished 150 years before. He declined out of his tzniut. However, as I said, wait, this is going to haunt him, this answer. So he declines this offering, and then comes another offering from Yerushalayim. We remember that Rav Shmuel Salant was very old and was already looking for someone that would replace him. We spoke about the Aderet that did came at the end, but they also offered the position to Rabbi Chaim Ozer Grodzinski. Again, a beautiful position to be able to go to Eretz Israel, become the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. We can only imagine, we can play with our imagination what would have happened if. But, you know, in history, speaking about what would have happened if, it's already not history, it's fiction. So no one can know. He has a beautiful letter he writes to someone. They don't give the name in the Sefer for reasons you would understand in a second. But it's a letter in which he writes to someone as an answer. So we don't have the question or the first letter that was sent to Reb Chaim Ozer. But what Reb Chaim Ozer writes is, you are telling me that because of all of the troubles to Am Israel, you want to go to Eretz Israel and sit and learn there quietly. You should know that it would have been also better for me and for my health to go to Eretz Israel and sit and learn there quietly. However, in times like that, we are not allowed to sit down quietly. We must stand up. And so do you, Mr. X. I do not have the name, but obviously he was a rabbi of some sort and scale. You must also stand up. You are not allowed to go and rest in Eretz Israel. So here we get a little window into what made him stay in Europe. His personal life were tragic. As I said, he was married to Alte, this daughter of one of the rabbis of Vilna. They had no children, just one girl that was born, and she was, they have many praises about her. However, at the age of 16, she got cancer. She was extremely ill for 4 years of sufferings, and he writes about it at length. He was tormented, by, as we can understand, by that. And the age of 20, she passes away. So 4 years of suffering, and then she passes away. That was in 1911, and he remained childless. After, his wife also perished, and then he remarried, but again, they had no children. His wife was murdered in Vilna later during the Holocaust. At the First World War, the Germans were about to conquer Lithuania. They did conquer Lithuania and Vilna. And the Russians, when they were withdrawing, they took, in order to make sure that the Jews that remained would not cooperate with the advancing German army. So the method that they figured out is, we will take the rabbis as hostages, and then the Jews would know that if they would cooperate with the Russians, then the rabbis would pay the price. They just understand that's the mind. That's of the, I mean, these are the people that you want to remain faithful to you, right? That's the way that you behave to them. And in the First World War, the Germans were considered good to the Jews. So we need to reverse what we usually understand. And now no one was good to the Jews. But in relation to the Tsarist Russia, they were considered as the best option. By the way, in the Second World War, at least in the first parts, there were still Jews that were trapped in this mindset that we should encourage the Germans and we should get them with open arms because they are better than the Russians. But everyone understood very quickly this mistake. So one of the first names on the list of the Jews that had to disclose themselves to the withdrawing Russians was obviously Rabbi Chaim Ozer. So he made a decision that he is not interested in going to Sibir in this train, and he is ducking the bullet, we may say, and he's running away, and he's hiding for the whole of the First World War. However, while obviously it was justified for him to run away, we can also understand that there were many Jews in Vilna that felt betrayed by their great leader, abandoning them in this difficult hour. Now, again, I explained the reasons, and I think that we can all appreciate and understand the reasons why he had no other option. It would not have helped them if he would have stayed, because he would have just been taken by the Russians. But many people still felt that they are being left alone without a shepherd. The man that replaced him was a name named Rav Rubinstein. Now, Rav Rubinstein was a very interesting figure by himself. He was a rabbi. He was a yeshiva guy from Slobodka, and now he was already mature. And he was the appointed rabbi, what was called then the Rav Mitam, the appointed rabbi by the Russian government. That was because he had Teudat Bagrut, right? He had a high school degree. So he was Rav Chaim Ozer could not serve as the formal rabbi. So the formal rabbi was this Rav Rubinstein. Now, up till the departure of Rav Chaim Ozer, it was very clear that Rav Chaim Ozer was the leader of the Torah of the generation. And Rav Rubinstein was a nice guy. I mean, he could have been a shul rabbi, but it was not in any league of Rav Chaim Ozer at all. However, when Rav Chaim Ozer left, then Rav Rubinstein, again, in an understandable move, took hold of all of the positions that now remained vacant and was managing to the best of his abilities. Also, he was like a social worker, like the new types of rabbis. Right? He was very nice to people. He was helping them. He was going to hospitals. He was going to things that someone like Rav Chaim Ozer was not necessarily doing, because Rav Chaim Ozer was a Torah giant of the old generation, of the old school. And so the outcome was that Rav Rubinstein gathered a lot of support from the local residents. After the First World War ended, and there was the Bolshevik Revolution, as we know, in Russia, and Russia was out of the war, and Lithuania was declared an independent country. And now that it was declared an independent country, then part of its new constitution was equal rights to Jews, which was a revolution that it's very difficult for us to understand even the magnitude of this revolution, and B, that there should be rabbis everywhere, which sounds nice, but now Vilna also must appoint a rabbi. Now that they must have a rabbi, the Haredim wanted Rabbi Chaim Ozer, who would return to the city, to become the rabbi. And again, we must admit that he was obviously, without doubt or question, the leading authority in the city. With no one in his league. He was a league to himself. However, Rav Rubinstein, who was now a member of the Mizrahi, and also was loved by the citizens of the city because he was seen as the one that did not run away at time of difficulty. He put himself as a candidate against Reb Chaim Ozer, and was supported by all of the Chiloni Tzionim in the city, and also by the Mizrahi in the city. And that gave him the majority over Reb Chaim Ozer. Now, that was, while everyone is I can understand the interest and the reasons behind everyone in their actions there. And I think it is clear that Reb Chaim Ozer didn't want the kavod of becoming the chief rabbi. As I explained earlier, when he was offered the position, he declined. He refused. And I also think that Rav Rubinstein only wanted to remain in the position that he now was presiding over, and he felt that he's doing a good job, and also many Jews in the city felt that he's doing a good job. And maybe the best way out was if that in some way they were able to hold two rabbis, right? Not a Sfaradi and Ashkenazi, but as they had before that, the spiritual rabbi and the appointed rabbi, in some way or other to have a system, a two-tier system in which it would be clear that Rav Chaim Ozer is the great halachic authority, and Rav Rubinstein is some type of an assistant. If they would have been able to come to this type of a compromise, it would have been beautiful. But I think that this is not history. We speak now about the present. Compromising with Jews, it's extremely difficult. Because, as they say, machloket leshem shamayim sofa litkayem. If everyone believes that what he is doing is for the sake of heaven, how can you compromise over the sake of heaven? And Hashem tells you, no, I want the sake of heaven is that you would compromise. That doesn't happen. Yeah, look around. Look at what is happening now. And they couldn't come to a compromise. Again, both, I think, if I understand the situation now, a lot was written. I didn't read everything because it's sort of a lashon hara. I don't have the heart to read this type. It's so sad. We have enough in our newspapers. We don't need also the lashon hara of last generation. However, to me, it's clear that both Reb Chaim Ozer and Rav Rubinstein would have gone to the compromise, but the people from both camps did not allow them to do so. For good reasons. Everyone worked for the sake of heaven. But the outcome was disastrous, because in the end, Rav Rubinstein won. Now, what does it mean? I would not dedicate now a session to Rav Rubinstein. Well, again, not because Chas v'Charila I have anything against him. I think he was a very good man and also a Torah scholar. But he was, as I said, he was like a shul rabbi. No one would give 200 years from now, 100 years from now, a shul about me, right? Not because I'm not a nice guy. I'm a nice guy, but there are greater people. You can, okay, you can never know, I guess. But again, so nothing against him. But obviously it was an affront. It was a shame to choose someone that is not Reb Chaim Ozer when you have Reb Chaim Ozer. And the outcome was that all relations between Mizrahi and Agudat Israel were severed. That was what is really important outcome out of the whole thing. Who's the rabbi of Vilna has no importance. But the Shesa, the split between the Mizrahi and the Agudat Israel was a disaster that, in a sense, accompanying us to this day. And that is because this inability to understand that they are both in the same boat. And Someone just a few months ago showed me a book that was written about the Jews in Germany in the decades leading to World War II. And the name of the book is The Pettiness of It All. So the pettiness of it all. You see, we are the pettiness. So I didn't read the books. So I cannot recommend, but the pity of it all. So that is in 1929. So 10 years before, 4 years before Hitler rise to power, 10 years before World War II, and what the Jews are doing is fighting about who would be the rabbi of Vilna, and splitting with each other and not being able to speak with each other. It is just, so again, it is mind-blowing, but just look around us. What are we doing today? Right? What are we doing? What was happening last night? So today we would bury Chas v'Chalila, but that's what would happen. 4 soldiers that fell, and last night, I don't want even to just read the newspapers. So how can you understand? You cannot understand it. You know, for years, I'm sorry, this is not part of history. It is, but that's most important lesson that we can learn from history, that we refuse to learn again and again. For years, we are learning the Agadeta in Gemara Gittin about the Romans right around circling the city. And the people inside, the warrior inside, I call them warriors, but not because they were fighting the Romans, because they were fighting with each other and they were burning the food storages. And how could it have been done? It must be just a story. It's a story. It's a symbol. It's supposed to teach us. No, that is just sheer facts about how we are behaving when the enemy is at the gates of the city. I pray to Hashem. That's what the kavanah I had today in Birkat Kohanim. In the end, excuse me, when we ask Hashem to bless us with shalom, v'yasem lecha shalom. That's because I don't know if anything that we can say can help. We say, Oseh shalom mimromav v'yaseh shalom aleinu. Maybe he's the only one. And that's very sad, if that is correct. So this is what the Jews were engulfed in 1929. I have here another few. Well, you know what? Let's continue with Rabbi Chaim Ozer for next, because I do want to read some of his answers. I think they are very important. Also, the introductions that he wrote reflect and represent the situation of the Jews. And we can see he printed one book in 1922, and then another one in 1939. And the introductions reflect the situation. I don't want to read it hastily. It deserves its place and time. So let's just continue Bezot Hashem next week, next Sunday. That will be the last shiur for the winter, and we'll reconvene in Mirza Hashem after Pesach.